chairperson chair for the Tuesday talks. And before I introduce Melissa, who's going to talk tonight, I'd like to just say a little tribute to Jean DeBach, who is a member of our board, who passed away today, up in her 80s, but active until last week, a lady, a grand lady, and she's supposed to do the lemonade and cookies tonight. So it's quite commendable that on the day that she was to do that, she's not here. But it's with sadness and heavy hearts that we remember her. Okay, so Melissa Ferretti is the chairwoman and president of the Herring Pond Wampanoag Tribe, and she'll discuss the Herring Pond Wampanoag Tribal history, traditional homelands, allotment of Indian lands, and tribal initiatives in the present. She's also a member of the Bourne Select Board, and she's also a realtor with Jack Conway.
Correct.
Okay.
But I was going to say, please forgive me if I'm a little raspy and a little stuffy. I don't know if you read the Cape Cod Times yesterday, but the Herring Pond Tribe, we did a traditional machine burn that started Monday of last week. We ignited the fire on Friday, and we have been in front of the campfire and burning this log. It's a 20-foot log. You start a fire in the top and you make a canoe out of it, basically. So I've been in front of the campfire for 7-8 days now, so I'm just a little raspy, so forgive me for that. It was a wonderful experience, and we'll be able to share some photos of that soon. So I always start out, Herring Pond, Sequana Marco Paquet. That is the word, the Wampanoag word for Herring Pond. The title of this, as many times as I've tried to change it and tailor it for each of my presentations, it really always ends up being the same. Listening to our ancestors and protecting our homeland. Because that is really what my responsibility as chairwoman is, to protect our homelands and to remember the ancestors that were here before us. So I'll start with a traditional Wampanoag greeting. Wanikisak, Natasumis, Melissa Ferretti, New Tomas, Sequana Marco Paquet, Ka Natai, Patuxet, Mornat. So what I've said to you is good day. My name is, or I am called, Melissa Ferretti. I am from Herring Pond in Plymouth. I'm from Plymouth, and I live in Bourne. So I'm a Herring Pond Wampanoag mother, grandmother, and I was raised in Cedarville by an elder of my tribe, Verna Harding. She was born in 1905. And many of you probably know where Cedarville is. It's right over the border in Bournedale. And I have honestly lived on my homelands my whole life. I grew up in Cedarville, as I said, and I've been in Bourne now the last almost 40 years. So as you'll see when I move on, I'll talk a little bit about our homelands. So I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge my tribal council and my board of directors, as you call it. Tribal communities, we do function very similarly, and we operate as a governing body, just like a municipality would, in a sense. Probably, obviously, a much smaller scale, and we use Robert's Rules of Order very loosely, because, of course, that was imposed upon us. So I won't run through this, but we currently have 3 officers, and our tribal council consists of the 4 there. We have a medicine man, and our enrollment department is one of our standing committees and one of our most important committees, if you ask me. So there's a lot of slides here. I won't read our mission and our purpose to you, but I'll just give you the quickly. Obviously, it's to strengthen the awareness and study of our history and our language and the pride of the Wampanoag Nation, and to preserve, promote, and protect those common welfare, cultural, spiritual, and economic well-being of our tribe, particularly our youth. So, post-contact map of the lands of the Herring Pond Indians, and I will say Indians some tonight, because in historical records and mass archives, Plymouth Registry of Deeds, we were called the Herring Pond Indians, and much of our land that was set aside for us was set aside to the Herring Pond Indians. So the divided lands of the Herring Pond Tribe consisted of 3 separate parcels. The largest was the Great Lot. So this is the Great Lot you see up here, and these lined areas were also common lands of the Herring Pond Tribe. Of course, at one time, this whole region you see here, we roamed that, and we would gather and hunt and forage those lands. But post-contact, when the Pilgrim came, the separatists arrived, and the colony was established, what they did is they set aside certain parcels that were only for the tribe. And it was written in some of the records as, the lands were set aside for the Herring Pond Indians to be theirs for them and theirs forever, to never be sold, lost, or stolen for any reason. Of these parcels you see here, we only have our meeting house, which is on the Herring meeting house lot. And we have a 6-acre parcel at the borders of Great Herring Pond that the town of Plymouth just recently deeded back. First time they had ever done so. So of the 3,000 acres that was set aside for us, we currently have only 6 acres that was given back. We have 0.43 of an acre that our meeting house now sits on that was at one time 200 acres. So the Great Lot being this largest portion you see here, Ellisville Harbor all the way back, Ponds of Plymouth, all of that was our land, common land. And then this parcel here, where our meeting house sits, which I will show you, is, as I said, 0.43. This was a 200-acre parcel. So what's really interesting for us here, we all live in Bourne, right? So the Herring River lot is probably the most important lot for our town here. The Herring River lot was 400 acres, and it went almost clear to Redbrook, right? So we have several burial grounds in this area, one on the banks of Great Herring Pond, and you can see the arrows here. This map actually came from the town of Plymouth Planning Department. So it shows you the pilgrim trails and the historic landmarks in that region. As you can see, there are many. So another map, this one is a Channing Howard map from 1942. Again, it identifies the three parcels that were set aside. And it says a combined ancient modern map illustrating the vicinity of the first settlement by the white man on Cape Cod, Sandwich, right? Bourne we know as Sandwich. Showing the Cape Cod Canal from Buzzards Bay to Cape Cod along the valleys of the original monument in the Scusset Rivers and the Indian lands at Great Herring Pond, and the vicinity of the Great Lot here, sorry about that, here, and then the meeting house lot here. So it says here that these lots were divided into 111 separate parcels. So they took the common lands that belonged to all of us, and they separated into separate lots and made it fee simple. Imposed taxes on us, taxation, something we did not understand, clearly. And so that's why we're here today. So this is just a little quickly, this is in 1982, this is the most recent, honestly, act that was created by the Commonwealth. And this is an Aboriginal Rights Proclamation. And it really identifies our rights to hunt and fish and to gather in the region. Native people, they have a right of easement through any property. It does not matter if it's private, it doesn't matter. A native person that's indigenous and is a card-carrying native can walk right through anybody's yard and go fishing to get access to the water, so long as it's for sustenance. So that's what that is. But it can be found online as well. Thousands of years of stewardship, right? As I said, 3,000 acres at one time, which was obviously much, much larger. It's a lot of history, so I apologize for going so fast. There's a lot of slides in this presentation. So brief history. Obviously, I won't read all this. We'd be here for a long time. But in 1655, the Plymouth colony officials agreed to set aside the lands for the Indian people's sole use. A plantation, a reservation for the praying Indians, which established at Herring Pond, otherwise known as the Herring Pond Plantation. So the plantation, as you see, there were several meeting houses built over time. John Conant being the first preacher, our first meeting house was built 1637, and there's been different, I put 1637, 1687 because there's different times on that. So with the support of Thomas Tucker and Richard Bourne, he preached to the natives. And Richard Bourne was known to the Wampanoag people as the White Sachem. That's what they called him. Because he was a friend to the Indians, he was a friend to our people. And he helped, along with Thomas Tupper, to build our first meeting house, which is at Burial Hill. I'm not sure if you know Bournedale. When you at Herring Run, you're at the Herring Run and you take a left at the light. There's that little landmark on the stone, and that's Burial Hill up behind it. So that was the place of our first meeting house. And then later, a second meeting house was built on Great Herring Pond at the edge of, in Bournedale, on the hill, so Little Sandy Pond Road, I don't know if anybody knows where that is. So right where the Herring Pond starts in Bournedale, if you take the dirt road, right up on the hill, that was the second meeting house that was built. So that meeting house, we were told, was overrun by black snakes, and we had to vacate. So next was our third meeting house, and that is the meeting house that we still possess today on Herring Pond Road, which is called the Pondville Meeting House, and we'll get to more of that. So I do want to say, so the population of Herring Pond living on the reservation in 1685 was 120 individuals. Not a very large population, right? By 1779, we numbered 108, and by 1825, our numbers had dwindled to 40. Whether we migrated elsewhere, some of our community members migrated to New Bedford for the whaling industry and things of that nature. So there we are. So here we are again. I won't go through this, but you all may have seen this. As I said, he was known as the White Sachem. So history continues. Let's see what's here. So I'm going to go up to the guardians of the Indians. This is an important time. In about 1746, the Commonwealth, the colony, or the Commonwealth, they established a guardianship over the Indians, or the Herring Pond Band. They established a guardianship over Mashpee and Pond Wampanoag as well. And Gideon Hawley and the more well-known Phineas Fish, and his name precedes him because he did some really fishy things, honestly. So they were the so-called guardians of our reservation. And they really did not guardian, they didn't do such a great job as we can see today. So in 1790, the Federal Non-Intercourse Act provided that no Indian lands could be transferred or sold without the federal government's approval. Obviously, the federal government shamefully dropped their trust responsibility at Herring Pond because this clearly did not happen. Our lands were slowly allotted, sold off, taken by taxes. I even saw one parcel that belonged to my grandfather that was taken for an amount of $18.15. William Apis is a Pequot and Methodist minister. He preached a sermon at Herring Pond. I really love this. In his essay, Indian Nullification, he talks about becoming lost on his way to Plymouth to Mashpee. And he strayed into an Indian community across an Indian in Sandwich, where he was invited to preach. So Sandwich being Bourne, right? So Apis, we did some research on him, and we've done our genealogy from 1600 through 1900 currently. We need to do the rest. And we had a fun fact that William Apis's daughter, and these are the things you find when you do these genealogies, his daughter Abigail married a Herring Pond Wampanoag member. It's not spoken in the history books, but our genealogy clearly says that that's the case. Many of our people intermarried with Mashpee and Aquina as well, moved to the different reservations. Phineas Fish, here we are. So he was the son of Jonathan Fish and Temperance Nye of Sandwich, of Bourne, right? So he graduated at Harvard in 1807, studied theology, and with John Simpson and Brewster. So in 1811, he was ordained and accepted to pastoral office at the Herring Pond, at the meeting house that I speak of, at Great Herring Pond. And he also preached to Mashpee, and he succeeded Gideon Hawley that I spoke of later. So Fish was supported, his payments were supported to, it was written that he was tasked with propagating the gospel to the poor Indians at Herring Pond. And Fish it ended up he was marred with controversy because he was accused of taking the funds from the Williams Fund and misspending and not spending them correctly. So he was entrusted with these funds by Harvard University, and he took advantage of it, according to the records. So he was called out by some gentleman, and he wrote letters to Fish asking him to explain his pastoral residence at Herring Pond, and they wanted information as to where the money went. And what happened is, he preached in the Mashpee community most of the time, and he was only tasked with preaching to Herring Pond, my community, 1/7 of the time. So he would very rarely be at our meeting house. But what Fish did is he created non-native churches. And he was supposed to be preaching to the natives to propagate the gospel and to bring us into Christianity. But what he was doing instead was creating white churches. And he ran the native people up. So this controversy marred him. He was removed from his duties. And this is much, obviously, a lot more than I'll go through. But like I said, he was marred with controversy, and he was boycotted by Herring Pond and Mashpee. And Mashpee actually sued Phineas Fish because of, to regain control of their meeting house, because he had taken it over and created a majority white church. So the accounts of the Guardians are housed at Massachusetts State Archives. There's just so many records there. So we've gone up and we started a digital heritage project. So part of that work is to scan and digitize these documents. They're very fragile, but the Mass Archives, they do allow you to go in, they allow you to handle the records, and they allow you to scan them. Especially us, because technically they belong to us, because they're accounts. So the accounts, the logs, they're all housed there, and it's basically, he talked about the records they explain money in and money out. And when you look at them, I said to myself, they were bookkeepers. That's what it looks like to me. They just managed money that went to native people. And here's one of the examples. So, one of many, as I said. And it's outlined, these are how they all look. There's a total, this is an annual report. There was an annual report written for, each year. And you can see here, Dr. Runnels was paid $80 for his services. $40 to Ellis for supplies, one of the families, to Ralph Blackwell, he's buried in our Herring Pond Cemetery. Theodore Hirsch, we have Hirsches on our roll today. And for cutting wood for Sunday service, right? So that's what they look like. So this one I really love, and I am going to read it. So some of the Guardians weren't so generous as to their analysis of the Herring Pond conditions of the tribe and what we were actually doing. They called us paupers and, as I said, the poor Indians at Herring Pond. But when you read this excerpt from George Marston, he obviously was a friend to the tribe. And he says, and this is exactly, I transcribed this from an old record. He says, the people of this place are in good condition. They have the comforts of life in as good a degree as the surrounding white people. They have land to cultivate, a fluid of wood to burn, and some for market. And their houses are generally in good condition, and they are active and can accomplish whatever they set themselves about. Some make farming their business, others go to sea and make first-rate sailors. They furnish more than their equal share to serve their country in the late wars, and they are men of valor, brave and ready, always ready when called, and found at their posts. So we fought in the wars alongside the non-native people, even though we weren't yet citizens of this country at that time. So there it is. And it talks a lot more about, we have a doctor, and we have good, they have good opportunities to educate their children. They have access to good schools. And we have a doctor of our own choice that we paid for. And they have a missionary, which it says was their own choice. I'm not so sure about that. But I like George Marston. I really enjoy that. So we talked already about this a little bit. but Indian policy and the allotment of tribal reservation lands in the 19th century. So 1850 again, so 37 years prior to the General Allotment Act, or the Dawes Act. Many people know what the Dawes Act is, or they've heard of it. And it's pretty scary because some of the most intelligent and well-educated scholars and lawyers and tribal attorneys that I've spoke to, they don't even know that the Dawes Act, 37 years prior to the Dawes Act actually being legislated through Congress, it was not enacted until 1887. In 1850, 37 years prior, they were already allotting our lands here. So the man was Henry Dawes. He was a main promoter of this bill, and he was an attorney, a politician, and he's notable for the Dawes Act, but he was from Cambridge, and he was doing this here in Plymouth to the Herring Pond people well before the Dawes Act was ever enacted. So we were their test case, right? It worked here, it worked in Plymouth, let's make it legislation for the whole country to use. And then, as you see, it says, as the Indian Land Tenure Foundation said, the Dawes Act, perhaps the single most devastating federal policy to be imposed on tribal nations in the United States. During the allotment of the reservations, the most productive land was identified as surplus to our needs, to the Indian needs, and sold off to the white settlers or business interests of other entities. And you can look that up on the Indian Land Tenure Foundation, but that's exactly what happened. The good lands and the lands that were affluent and they were profitable were taken from the tribe, and we were given what we made. So we talk about John Milton Earl. So Earl, he was tasked with writing a report in 1859, 1861 on the condition of the Indians in the Commonwealth. And Earl explained the Herring Pond Reservation, it was formerly covered with wood, which had all been cut off. And being pitch pine land, none of the new growth had attained sufficient size for cutting, nor will it for some time to come. A fire ran over the portion of it, which was the largest growth a few years since, and it destroyed the wood, which is large enough to cut. So as you see, again, the lands were taken, allotted, so they say. So this is why I love this, because I was looking at the photos of this building, and you can see the similarities, right? We only had one door in our schoolhouse. So this is our Pondville Meeting House. We still have care and custody of it today. It was built from an 1838 petition from John Conant and the Herring Pond Indians and the Blackground Tribe to build a schoolhouse. We wanted to educate our children. So this meeting house is really, it was the center of our existence, and it still is today, because it's all that remains, as I said. It was originally on 200 acres, but it is now 0.43. That building sits in the same spot, and it's half an acre as opposed to 200. So here's the actual petition that was written from John Conant to request the Sundery to build the schoolhouse. So they talked about the Blackground Tribe, and I threw this in here because we think about, the references in the Plymouth County Grantor-Grantee indices says that the Herring Pond Plantation is the Blackground Tribe, right? The initial assumptions were that it was a racist reference to the intermarriage of Native Americans and African Americans, right? But a phenomenon documented exclusively elsewhere in southern New England, Ernest Clifton Ellis, he offers an alternate explanation for this etymology of this place. Black ground got its name from the low bluff, and peat from an old burying swamp, right? Wouldn't that make sense? So here is our meeting house in 1928. That was when a revival sort of swept the nation, and the Native people started to, I guess I could say, make noise. And that's when we asserted our rights to a lot of our land, our buildings, and what remained we tried to keep. So this is our Herring Pond Meeting House today. You can see the original structure here. The steeple is gone, but the bell tower is still inside. in this portion. And this portion here that you see is actually, I found some records in my digital heritage work that says that portion was old Army Barracks, Mogus Air National Guard base, that was trucked over. They contracted a gentleman out of Wareham, and he trucked that portion of, it was an old Quonset hut, we think, and it was trucked from Mogus Air National Guard base all the way to Cedarville to join into the church. And what's really great, if you were able to get inside, the outside wall is still there. So they really just connected it, and that was it. You know, it was adjoined to the meeting house portion, and there we are. And that's what she looks like today. So I'd love to talk about Sacrifice Rock and Ezra Stiles. So we know Sacrifice Rock is Chamber Rock, that neighborhood now. And Ezra Stiles, he's an educator and a theologian, and he authored numerous scholarly publications, and he went on to serve as president of Yale. But he also studied rock formations, go figure. So he took, based on a conversation he had with Benjamin Seifert, who was a herring ponder, we confirmed that. He talks about, as to the stone in the Plymouth Road, the Indians being asked the reason for their custom and practice say they know nothing about it. Only that their fathers and their grandfathers and their great-grandfathers did so, and they would charge all their children to do the same. That if you did not cast a stone or a piece of wood or something on the rock when you pass it, that you would not prosper, and you would particularly not be lucky when you were hunting deer. So, he said they duly observed this custom, but the English called them sacrificing rocks, though the Indian doesn't imagine it's a sacrifice. It says, as at least they did not kill or offer no animals there, nothing but wood and stone. So there's that. So traditional knowledge. This is a big part of the work that we do now. Revitalizing and educating our youth about the traditional knowledge and food sovereignty and teaching them how we would sustain ourselves is it's important today. So as I said, we just did a machine burn this week, and it took us a full week to get that log into a place where we could even carve it and get it ready. So that's one of those traditional knowledge items in the culture that we're trying to share, to show them how hard it was back then. So if you wanted a boat, you had to burn it out of a 20-foot log so that you could get through the highways, which was the waterways, right, with this log and sink it. So April marks the beginning of Sequan, spring, and the new year for Wampanoag people. So Dynapath. This is where I was telling you that we had, in 2019, one of our parcels, the great lot that I had spoke of, there was one lot, and it was the home lot of Sarah Thompson. So when Sarah passed, she gave the land to her daughter, but her daughter was not on our roll. So there was some court and some litigation that happened. But she ended up getting the property, and then as soon as they could transfer it and they cleared the title to it, she sold it, of course. So Dynapath, named after Dinah Chummick, who is buried there. Currently there are 8 graves there, and 7 of them are marked. The youngest one being Lucy Anna, she's 3 years old. The graves are, the fence is down, the stones have been, as you see here, the stones are on the ground, and we have a great deal of work to do with that lot. But it was pretty amazing to have the town of Plymouth deed us that land back. It was the first time that had ever happened historically in the town of Plymouth that they ever returned land to a tribe. We know that they were really good at taking the land, so it was a really refreshing experience. We were very scared going to town meeting to ask for this land back because we did not know how we would be perceived. We did not know what the residents were going to think. And it was almost scary, right? We were very nervous going in and asking for this parcel. It was a tax taking, so it was sitting on the as empty, and they needed an owner, and why not the tribe? So when we went to town meeting, Of course, we got through the select board. They approved it to go onto the warrant. And when we got to Plymouth, their voting is different than Bourne. They have the caucuses where there's about 8 people or so on each caucus, and they do the voting. So surprisingly, we did not get one nay, no no's. It was a 100%, let's give this land back to the tribe. So pretty awesome. So Herring Pond Reservation, I love this. This is just a few photos. Our medicine man, Hazel, a lot of people know Aunt Hazel Currents. She works at the library. This is my son, my granddaughter fishing. And I love what he said here. He did an article with the Cape Cod Times, and he said, if we take a second to remember how beautiful Mother Nature is, we might treat it differently. That really says a lot, right? Self-determination and preservation, here we are again. So as I said, we want to talk about the tribe today and the work that we're doing today. And as I said, you know, the land's of course greatly diminished, but our pride is not. And we make sure that what we have, we take care of, and we're teaching our youth every day to remember the history, but not dwell on it, not stay there. We know that there was a lot of things and there was a lot of generational trauma that's real, but we need to move on past it and be better at what we do so that we can sustain our tribe and that we can be economically efficient and that we can have this machine burn that we did. And it's been a lot of work, but it's been very important. So the meeting house, the diner path, and we have several burial grounds. One in Morndale, right at the banks, it's still there. That's our active burial ground today. We have another, the lower cemetery, that's right on Herring Pond Road. And there's several other burial grounds in New Cedarville, Plymouth, all the way up. So these are just, as I said, this is just a short list of some of the work we've done. Digital heritage. We've created the Land Stewardship and Youth Ecological Knowledge Project. I co-taught with Dr. Amy Denouden at UMass Boston. That was an amazing experience. She's in the Department of Women's and Gender Studies, and she teaches tribal nation self-determination and sovereignty in North America. And what an experience that was. Stewardship of our diner path, of course. And just we have many different connections that we've worked with. We're doing work with Massachusetts Department of Health currently. They have given us funds to support, after COVID, not being a state, being a state acknowledged tribe versus federally recognized. We're not eligible for a lot of the benefits that the federal tribes are. So it was critical that we pushed and we contacted the Commonwealth and said, where are our vaccines? Where are our masks and our PPE to protect our people? Because we were not getting that. So Department of Public Health has been pivotal. They listened and they made that happen. We hosted vaccine clinics, and we've done work with recovery support for our people. Nellie Mae Education was a supporting organization of people of color. So we really have done a great deal of work. So I usually end here with Verna and my Aunt Phyllis. So these are some of our elders. This is Verna. I was raised by Verna. And that is her Quincy Shipyard picture. Verna was one of the first women to ever work alongside the men at the Quincy Shipyard, along with several other Herring Pond women in Nashville. So the women worked at the shipyard, imagine that. So that's her shipyard photo. She was born in 1905. And we were raised, honestly, I think about it now, and I said, we probably ate more rabbit and deer meat than we ate steak and chicken. Because Verna was always hunting, my memories of her were sitting at the table cutting fish. Always, like growing up. We'd go down to Herring Pond, she'd walk us down the hill, she didn't drive. And she'd walk us down the hill, she'd roam in the woods, we'd gather. She knew where every plant and every medicine was in the woods. Verna knew it. And she would teach us that and drag us around. We even had a herring shed in our backyard, probably one of the only children in the district with a herring shed, right? That Berta would wait for the herring to start running. And she would be out there and she'd send my sister and I off into the woods. And she'd say, I need this, this, and this. Sweet Fern being the one I remember the most for some reason. And she would start, we used to think it was really gross because she'd string the herring through the eyes. And she'd put them on the stick, all in a row, and she'd hang them in the shed. It's all cobwebs in there, and she would smoke them for what seemed like a very long time. I think when you're a child, right? It seemed like a long time. I'm not sure how long it was. But that was a process that happened every year. We always had a giant garden. She cared. Nothing went to waste in our household. And Verna she knew it all, for sure. That's her sister Phyllis. Phyllis was 100 when she passed in 2019. And Tunny, Uncle Tunny, his family still lives in the Herring River lot. They still own that land today. And Tunny passed in 2020, well, during COVID, so no service for him, but he was 90. Just a quick photo of us at a gathering, the Herring River lot. That's just some of us there. More pics. My Uncle Charlie, he was our chief, and then you see the front of the Pondville Meeting House here, so you can see now that's my granddaughter Ava. And so you can see this portion here is the Odissaire National Guard Base old Quonset hut, you assume. I still think it's pretty amazing that they trucked it over the bridge just to get it here. Another map, it's a Whitman Howard. There's a lot of these maps you can find out there. And this is one as well that talks about, you know, the first meeting house, as we said, in 1637. See, it's 37 here. I've seen it 87 in other places at the Burial Hill. And then our present meeting house, it says, which is crazy, it says 1860. That's not correct, because it was built from an 1838 petition. So it hadn't been erected by 1840. And I actually found the documents when I was up at Mass Archives that showed the wood and the paint and the nails that they used to build our meeting house. So that's not accurate. And I think another thing that is important to say when we talk about the records at Mass Archives, they're often very sad. I saw one document where poor Miss Hitty, she died in the barn of the farmer, and she had no family. So one of the excerpts in there was the farmer was billing the Commonwealth for the blankets that he buried her in, the wood that he used for her coffin, the nails. So poor Miss Hitty died in the barn, and she had no family. So a lot of them are like that. It talks about, you know, families and these things. That gets me inspired. So another collaborations, and that's it.
Did a very good job.
Yeah, thank you. Any questions? I can take some questions. I don't know how much time we have. I think we go, oh, we have a little time, right? Sure, go ahead.
Yes, I'm just curious, what was the population of your tribe when the Pilgrims came in?
So what we had, I mean, that's a good question, because we hear the stories of Patuxent, you know, Patuxent is a place, not a people, right? So the Wampanoag Confederacy was actually a loose confederacy of like 16 different tribes at one time. We know about Massasoit and King Philip and all of those things. So it's hard to say what the Herring Pond people were at that time, because there were so many different communities that lived in the area. And they were all kind of saying, oh, this is my land, and there was a lot of controversy actually between the native peoples as well. So the one that we had was, it said that in 1655 that we numbered the Herring Pond people, which was Patuxet. We were what remained of Patuxet. We see this farce in the, you know, at Pilgrim Hall and places that says that the Squanto came and all was lost. Well, that's not entirely accurate, because we just left the colony. We went to the farthest reaches of Great Herring Pond into Bournedale, as far away from the colony as we could, while still staying close to Bourne and Plymouth, right? So 105 was what they said, and then by 1850, as I had mentioned, our numbers had dwindled to 40. So today, we have approximately 200 enrolled members. So we're a very small community, we always have been. It's a beautiful thing, though, right? Mashpee, I think Wampanoag has about 4,000 members. And most tribes, and there's some tribes that are in the United States that are fairly recognized that have as few as 20. So, yeah, that's a good question. Go ahead.
And this is a follow-up question. I've always been curious about how the Herring Pond Tribe is related to the Mashpee.
Very good question. Yeah, so historic tribes in the Commonwealth. So there was the Herring Pond, Herring Pond Tribe, which we were in Plymouth, and then there was Mashpee and Aquina. So we were all sister tribes, is what we called each other. And many of our people intermarried with Mashpee. When we look at that, I mentioned the Earl Report. So the Earl Report is what we use today to determine descent and eligibility for membership. So in the Earl Report, I mean, you would see, Herring Pond woman, female, married to, it would be a Mashpee man, but they were living on the Herring Pond reservation. So they were considered Herring Ponders. You were determined by the community that you lived in. Regardless if you were Herring Pond, Aquina, Christian Town, Natick, it didn't matter. If you were, they would identify you as Herring Pond or Mashpee or Herring Pond and Aquina, but you would be in that community. Very good question.
But, so what I'm trying to figure out is early on, I just heard you mention that the Herring Pond originated in Tucson, but that's not true for Mashpee, right?
No, actually, some of their people may have, and that's a lot of them, they are the Wampanoag people, and technically we all have a connection to the colony because the colony oversaw us, and the guardians that I spoke of, they oversaw the 3 bands of the Wampanoag Nation. So, technically, in a way, Mashpee has a connection to Plymouth. So does an Aquina, because the colony oversaw us. But the Herring Pond are the only people that were ever in Plymouth and Bourne, yes. Yeah, people don't know that.
So I do have one more.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
And that is,
Good question.
how is the Herring Pond, because there's several Herring Pond locations, is Manamet and...
So Herring Pond, our lands are partly in Bourne and partly in Plymouth. So majority of our membership, your membership, although some of our people, of course, moved and migrated elsewhere, and some moved out of state and lived in different countries for work, but the majority of our membership lives in and around Plymouth or Bourne.
So what I'm trying to ask is, what was the relationship to Tucson?
Of Tucson Trading Post.
Yeah.
Well, the Trading Post was a place that it was a central location where the native people and the pilgrims traded goods and wampum and things like that. So the Tucson Trading Post was a place that Mashpee, Aquina, I think all the native people would have gone. So that's a great question, yes.
Thank you.
So what tools were used to hollow out the burn barn?
Oh, that's a really great question. It was a long week and we're not done. I was there this morning. So we started, it was pretty amazing how they did it. So the log arrived, it was 20 feet. It was just crazy big, 20 feet long, and it was 3 feet long. I mean, it's massive. So when I first looked at it, I said, what did we get ourselves into? But we did it. So they kind of put stakes in the top to hold the coals. So we basically started a fire in the pit, and then we dragged the coals over and started the burn slowly. And so the tools that they used to burn and scrape, because it's a burn and scrape method, they use wood, just sticks and from nature, and just to dig as it burned. They dug it out with the sticks. And they did use some man-made tools as well. It's not this, we'd be there forever if we didn't carve it and shape it with a chainsaw, right? We had to cheat a little bit. But the burn itself was done traditionally. But yeah, can you imagine how long it would take if we had to cut the tree down. I'll get you, Dora, this nice lady was first, I'll go
I
ahead.
just wanted to say that the house, the church on Birchstone Road in Falmouth, East Falmouth, Christ Lutheran was also moved from over there as well.
Oh, really? Yeah, it's something crazy. I know a lot of the Quonset huts are probably existed around here. John?
So I have a zillion questions, so I'll stick to just one about the canoe and one about something else.
Sure.
So, did you keep the fire going all night, which I've heard was the tradition before, or did you put it to sleep at night and start again the next
That's
day?
a great question. I'm raspy and stuffy right now because we slept there. So we pitched our tents, and I said to myself, I'm not as young as I used to be. Camping used to be fun. So the first night it was great. I was still young, and I'm inhaling the smoke, and it's just going. And we kept it 24/7 because we wanted to get it done in 5 days, which we did. So yes, we camped there. They had shifts that people came to take a shift to keep it going all night. It was pretty windy on the banks of Great Herring Pond where we burned it as well. So it was a pretty arduous process, and it gets scary because of, you have to have somebody spraying water like the whole time. We had a little pump, those little, the insecticide bottles, and you got one guy spraying water so the fire doesn't catch on the sides, and it was quite the process. So yeah.
So the other question has to do with connecting the schoolhouse here to Herring Pond. So you go back to our past pictures, there's plenty of Wampanoag people here. There were always a presence here in Cataumet, and sometimes they'd identify as Herring Pond or Mashpee, but they're here.
Yeah.
And so I wondered if you remember Milton Norris.
Milton
Norris.
Morris.
He would have been, so
That burner would have known.
when you were young, he might have been an older man. He played trumpet.
I wish Verna was still living, because I bet you she would know it, because Verna knew everybody.
So he was a cousin of the Pells who lived here. You probably
I know the Pals,
you know
yes.
Francis.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
So they all went to school here. Milton was always an interesting character because to me, for some reason, the Wampanoag kids were all girls.
Yeah, the Pells are.
The Pells had 6 girls, and the Hammonds and Tobys had a zillion girls. And there was Milton always in the middle of the class picture. Like, and so I tried to track him down. I talked to Frank Hicks, and somebody else told me that he moved and lived in Dorndale the rest of his life. So I didn't
Really?
know. And they
I'll
told me
have to
he
ask
played trumpet. He played a really mean trumpet, they said, and he played all kinds of bands.
Interesting. I like what you say about the girls, so it just brings me to so a lot of people don't know that Wampanoag people are matrilineal, right? Our women are in charge. In some of societies, the women could unseat a man, a male leader, if he wasn't doing a good job. So women, even now, our Herring Ponders, we are definitely female majority. And our medicine man, he says it all the time, he's like, man, so many women. But it's true, and it's always been that way. But when the Pilgrims arrived, you think about it, the men were in charge. It's like, what, you women are in charge? What's going on here? So there was one woman, her name was, oh gosh, I just lost the thought on her. Weetaboo. And she died in a swamp being chased by, she was killed in a swamp, so they say, in Middleborough or in that area. And she was a female leader, but you don't hear about her because they don't talk about her in history because they didn't want to, the colonists didn't want to talk to our women. They wanted to talk to the male leaders, So that's a good question. Yeah, so I'll try to find that out for you though. It's what was it again? Milton Norris.
Norris.
I'll find out. If he was in Bourndale, I'll be able to get an answer for that.
He might have been considered Mashpee, I don't know. So
Maybe,
might not show up in the
possible.
roles.
Any more questions?
It's kind of interesting. My husband and I were discussing this the other night. What do Native Americans want to be called now? First people? I mean, what's the correct, what is politically correct, or what is it that you wish to be called?
So, I'm one of those people, I don't really get uptight about the titles. I know there's a lot of Native people that don't call me an Indian, don't call me Native. I mean, I I say Indian all the time, and the Quinta chair, she says the same thing. She's like, I call myself an Indian. I mean, Bert, that's what we said. So I guess if we were to ask the majority of the native people, you know, most people say indigenous people now. That's sort of the new thing. Native American, they don't really like, a lot of people don't like, and you hear, they don't like Indian. But I'm not like, I don't get I won't get offended if you say Indian, honestly. So. My neighbors might not be happy that I said that, but it's just me. I think that we were referenced in historical records as the Herring Pond Indians. I mean, that's what we were called. So.
Harding is your American.
Harding is my maiden name. That's my maiden name. Yes, I am a Harding.
So where is that name when my friend is a Harding English? So, you know, that's an English name.
So it is, but a lot of the native people, even starting with King Philip, Philip's name was, his name was Metacom, and what happened is we took English names. Oh yes, and so I'm a Harding because of my great-great-great-grandfather, who married Love Saunders, who was a Herring Ponder. So Love Saunders and Lovey Valentine, she's written as, and they're also in John Cotton's congregation, some of the Valentines and our people now, the Seabits and the Comets. And yeah, so that's a really
So I'm going to ask her, she should check that.
She could, sure. You don't know until you look at your genealogy and see where you descend.
So that's a very popular name.
Yeah. Interesting.
Sure.
Speaking of names, could you tell us the names of Cataumet and Skintig and so forth? What?
You know, Cataumet was like Cataumet. It was spelled different. There are some maps that have the town names, but they're not in Wampanoag. So the Wampanoag language was just revitalized. So John Eliot's Bible was the first Wampanoag written book. It was a Bible written by Eliot. He didn't get it right at all, a lot of the time. So that's a good question, but that would be something we'd have to ask the language committee because they do a lot of that work. And like Herring Pond had to be translated. And it took a while because Herring Pond, herring is the sea climb, is the spring fish. So the language is polysynthetic. So like one word in English is like it's an entire sentence. And it's just one word in Wampanoag. So it's hard to translate. I'm not sure if they translated Cataumet yet, but I could find out.
I was always told it's a good fishing place.
Good fishing place, right?
So I don't pretend to know language. I read a lot about what the early English said about the language. So there's two place names she mentioned. One is Cataumet, which is the name originally of the harbor here.
Yeah.
But the little pond, which we now call a harbor, is called Squetig.
Squetig, yeah.
I don't know, it's the name of the fish. I'm guessing that in the Wampanoag language, the name of the fish has a meaning.
Sure. So Herring Pond is sea climb.
When Judy said it means good fishing place, I think if you put Squetig next to Cataumet, that makes it look like fish because of the Squetig. But I've been told that the name Cataumet comes from Catam, the sea.
Let me see. Let me show you this here. So I'm gonna let me go up to the first slide and just show you real quick. Let me get up here on our logo. So if you see our logo, like you look here. So we say Pondo, these are the English words, right? Patuxet, Nanamat, they had different sayings in Wampanoag. So this here, Kumasa Kumkanet, it's written all over the maps. And it's written that it just means Great Herring Pond. We've read that it means, like you said, it means like the big rock by the water. And there's all these different myths about what Kumasa Kumkanet meant. We can't translate it. It doesn't mean anything. The only thing in Kumasa Kumkanet that signifies anything is the IT at the end or the UT, which signifies location. So crazy enough, Plymouth said, well, we want to name this Kumasa Kumkanet Preserve. Can you tell us what the word means? We can't translate it. So we translated Sequanamako, which is the word for Herring Pond. So Kumasa Kukun, we don't know. Maybe an Apache person or somebody else called it that. We have no idea. So it just goes to show, a lot of it is kind of folklore and just somebody guesses, right? Or the word sounds like something. So that word was spelled with a K, K-A, K-O, K-M. It was spelled C-A-C-O-C, and it's on different maps all different ways. And we've tried to translate it, and we can't. So we told Plymouth, we said, we don't know what it means because it doesn't mean anything.
So there were maps made by English people that said that as part of
Yes, yes. A lot of maps said Kumasa Kumkana. They say that the village, the Herring Pond is they say that that's what our people were called. And when we went to the language committee, we have one linguist in Herring Pond who's fluent in Wampanoag. And she went through the Wampanoag dictionary. She talked to the lead people at the Wampanoag language committee, and they're like, nothing in that word means anything. The only thing that signifies location is the IT at the end. If it was a UT or an IT. So, yeah, isn't that strange?
No, isn't it because of the source that they're looking, I mean, the only source they have is, like you said, the Bible.
Could have been somebody, right? It might have been from the Bible. It could have been another native that said, that's what it's called. Like, we don't know. We have no idea. We can't figure it out. We haven't done. We want to dig though. We're curious now. We're like, okay, where did it originate? Why were we called Kumasa Kumkana when it clearly isn't in the dictionary for the Wampanoag language, except for the IT or the UT?
But it is a Wampanoag word.
We know it's not. No. The IT at the end means location. We know that. So they had that part right. The two letters at the end is the only thing that tells us that it was a location.
So do you know the earliest occurrence of that word?
We don't, but we're digging in that now because it's very curious to us why. So we couldn't use the word. We said we have to translate herring pond. So she went to the dictionary, and this is how you say herring pond. Interesting. Yeah, go ahead, John.
There are some place names that I think you've been able to translate, like
Yes, the
Pacasset
snap CB.
or Pacasset.
Yeah.
So, but again, people sometimes they get all hung up on the spelling, but that's our English spelling within the Arabic alphabet
Right.
of a language that was never written that way. So
Right.
there's so much, even the English language didn't have a standard spelling in the 1600s, so there was no correct way to spell even the English word.
Sure, right, we
Spell it
see
any way
them.
you wanted. So all those kinds of details mean we're trying to impose the way we see things now on top of the fact that that's being imposed on top of a language that the people translating it didn't understand. So
Sure.
it's not surprising. It is surprising to me actually how many place names are somewhat translatable.
Yeah, it's really hard because we wanted to sort of identify plants, right? We asked the language committee, we said, well, we're doing the digital heritage project and we'd really like to identify some of the plants. And like my name, for instance, my name is Golden Dragonfly, but the only way to say it would be golden bug or golden insect because there was no word for dragonfly. So I'm Golden Dragonfly, but there's no really word for dragonfly. It would be golden insect and it would be completely spelled totally different. So it's just really fascinating how the words are, it takes them, one plant could take them like 3 weeks to translate. So they go to the dictionary, they try to put the words together, and it's really hard. It's a very hard language. It's hard to learn and to say, and I've done the beginner class twice, and I barely speak. I can do the prayers really good, and I'm really good at, the prayers I can do really well. I can teach myself because I know the sounds. But actually making sentences is really hard. Unless it's in the book.
All right, thank you, Melissa. Thank you.